Sergeant Webb found the alien woman in the burning wreckage, and while his training told him to leave the enemy to die, his humanity told him something more important. She needed help. Marcus hesitated only a moment longer than usual as he peered into the twisted metal of what was once an elegant HFY spacecraft. The flames had already begun to lick at it from several angles, and in those moments between life and death for this creature, Marcus felt his heart clench. She was wounded beyond recognition, her true ethereal beauty hidden under a mask of mangled flesh. He approached cautiously but firmly as the alien woman tried to crawl away with pained whimpers that sounded almost like sobs mixed into an unfamiliar language. Her movements were sluggish and filled with pain, yet somehow she managed to drag herself several feet back against the burning debris in her desperation for space from him. Marcus' first instinct was to follow, but he stood his ground instead. "Hey," he said gently, crouching down next to where she lay, reaching out slowly towards her side that had clearly been hit by a bullet or shrapnel. "I'm not here to hurt you." His hand hesitated an inch from the alien's mottled skin before extending fully and placing his kit on the ground beside them. The wounded woman froze momentarily at Marcus' touch, her single good eye widening in disbelief as if she couldn't comprehend why he wasn't simply ending her misery. It was clear to him that this would be a challenge convincing an injured alien warrior who had seen too many humans act purely out of self-interest and hatred toward their kind. "Let me see those wounds," Marcus insisted kindly, speaking loudly enough so the woman wouldn't miss his meaning despite likely not understanding human words fully. "You need medical attention." She shuddered violently as he probed gently at her injuries, flinching away from each touch with visible pain, but also some level of wariness and fear that was almost palpable in the air around them. "I am going to make you better," Marcus assured her quietly once more. "Do not worry about your appearance or what you think others might see in this state." The alien woman's body language shifted slightly as he spoke, though whether it was due to an attempt at understanding him or pure resignation before the inevitable was impossible for Marcus to tell. "Why do you care?" she finally managed through pained, rasping breaths. "They all want me dead. Why would a human soldier help?" Marcus paused in his examination and met her gaze firmly, ignoring the pain in those depths that screamed of both physical injury and the torment of being seen this way by everyone around them. "Because not every human is like them," Marcus replied steadily. "I am here because I want to save lives no matter who or what they are." His eyes softened as he carefully began cleaning a deep gash across her side, his movement steady despite the messiness of their surroundings and situation. She watched him silently for several long moments after that, clearly torn between disbelief in his offer of help and genuine gratitude mixed with confusion over how anyone could see beyond this hideous form to care about anything else. Marcus didn't mind the silence. He let her take as much time as she needed to understand what was happening. As he worked diligently on treating each wound despite the woman's initial reluctance, a sense of quiet understanding seemed to grow between them, though it was purely based in actions and silent nods rather than words exchanged, since their comprehension levels were so vastly different. Marcus never lost focus. His eyes were trained solely upon the task at hand, while also maintaining an unwavering commitment towards healing this creature that many others would have left for dead. The alien woman, Zy'lethara, continued to watch him closely through her pain state, trying hard to understand why a soldier of another species would care about saving someone whose only purpose seemed to be dying here. Marcus' actions spoke louder than words ever could in demonstrating his true intentions and genuine desire to assist. As the flames grew closer, threatening to consume both survivor and medic alike, if they didn't move fast enough, Marcus made quick but steady progress, bandaging up Zy'lethara's wounds with surprisingly gentle care given their dire circumstances. Each successful step towards ensuring her survival further cemented a fragile bond between them built entirely on mutual respect born of shared pain and struggle. "We need to get you out of here," Marcus said firmly once he had stabilized most visible injuries as much as possible under field conditions, glancing around at the encroaching fire with renewed urgency in his eyes. "I'll carry you if I have to." She nodded wordlessly, but still hesitated slightly when it came time for Marcus to lift her up despite clear signs that she was losing consciousness from blood loss and trauma combined. "Stay awake," he urged, quickly gathering supplies needed before moving swiftly into action once more. Zy'lethara felt his touch, strong yet careful, as if handling something precious beyond measure. Her fear began slowly fading away amidst growing acceptance of this unexpected kindness that had come out of nowhere, but now seemed to be her only hope for survival after all these years battling against foes unwilling or unable themselves extend similar mercy. With one arm slung over Marcus' shoulder, he supported Zy'lethara as best he could while rushing them both towards safety from the flames. The ground under their feet was rough and unforgiving, but neither let up in pursuit of escape until finally reaching relative cover away from immediate danger. "I will get you to a proper healer," Marcus assured her once they stopped momentarily for breath, his voice steady despite knowing full well there would be consequences if caught helping an enemy. "I promise." Her only response was another silent nod before closing her eyes briefly in exhaustion and pain that had likely been building up over time without rest or medical care. Marcus took one last look around to ensure no immediate threats lurked nearby before gently laying Zy'lethara down on the cool ground where they currently stood. He then began assessing any additional injuries he may have missed due to initial chaos, as well making plans for their next steps towards safety and medical aid far from here, where she could finally receive proper care without fear of reprisal or misunderstanding. In this moment, amidst war's harsh realities, something unexpected bloomed between two souls bound together by shared suffering rather than mutual hatred. A bond forged in acts of kindness against all odds, one that would prove stronger still as the story unfolded beyond these first pivotal moments under burning wreckage and ash-filled skies. The distant crackle of gunfire faded as Marcus and Zy'lethara moved deeper into a narrow ravine, their breath mingling in the cool night air. He carried her carefully over rough terrain, ensuring that each step was secure despite his own exhaustion from hours of treating wounds on the battlefield. In one hand, he held medical supplies, in the other, a dim flashlight that cast eerie shadows as they hurried. The cave entrance loomed ahead like an old friend after days spent wandering through treacherous landscapes. Marcus pushed Zy'lethara inside gently and laid her down against the cold rock wall, his heart pounding with relief at finding this sanctuary from the relentless firestorm outside. He quickly surveyed their surroundings, small crevices where water might drip in enough space to lie flat without fear of being crushed by falling rocks. It was a haven they desperately needed. "Stay here," Marcus instructed softly, knowing she would need rest and time for her injuries to stabilize. Without hesitation, he began setting up his supplies near the entrance: bandages, antiseptics, basic medications, tools that could be used both as medical instruments and weapons, if necessary. He had learned long ago never to assume safety in times of war. Zy'lethara lay still for several moments, her breathing shallow, but steady, a sign she was beginning to recover from the shock and loss of blood. Marcus knelt beside her, his hand hovering near her wounds before he hesitated again, this time out of respect rather than fear. "I'll be back soon," he murmured instead. His voice echoed slightly off the walls, as if the cavern itself shared in their silent communication a rare moment of peace amidst chaos. He quickly set up a makeshift medical station, arranging items methodically to ensure everything was easily accessible when needed. The cave's dim light flickered through the entrance, but did little to illuminate his work beyond basic shapes and forms. Once he felt relatively prepared, Marcus returned to Zy'lethara's side with determination etched on his face. She watched him silently as he approached, her gaze wary yet trusting in a way that still astonished him deeply. "I'm going to take another look at your wounds," Marcus said softly but firmly. He knelt beside her once more and gently lifted the makeshift bandages covering her most severe injuries. Her skin was mottled gray-green, broken by deep scars and burns testaments to battles fought long before this one had begun. The sight of it made him flinch inwardly, not from revulsion, but empathy for what she must endure daily. "Why, help!" Zy'lethara's voice broke through his thoughts like a whisper in the dark, fragile yet strong. Marcus paused, considering her question deeply as he worked to clean and rewrap the wound with care, his fingers moving deftly despite how rough they looked under their battle-worn appearance. "You are hurt," was all he said at first. It felt inadequate somehow, but also honest enough for now. He didn't flinch when his hands made contact, only gently adjusting her position so she could rest more comfortably against the wall. She watched him closely then, eyes wide and searching beneath thick lashes, one eye swollen shut by injury or fatigue no amount of healing could undo just yet. "Enemy," Zy'lethara croaked again, as if daring him to admit it was true despite his actions thus far. He shrugged slightly in response, simple and unassuming, but his tone carried weight when he spoke next. "You are hurt," he repeated softly, but with conviction that left no room for argument or misunderstanding. "That is all I see." In this moment, there was nothing between them save mutual respect forged under the grueling trials of battle. No politics, nor past grievances could interfere here in their isolated sanctuary. They were two beings united by a shared need to survive against impossible odds. Zy'lethara's eyes softened then, though she couldn't help but still feel a lingering sense of disbelief over such kindness offered freely despite everything they stood for, being enemies by every definition known across galaxies. "You are different," was all she managed to say through gritted teeth as he worked to make her more comfortable. Marcus gave no reply beyond nodding understandingly, his fingers never pausing in their task, even when the cave's dim light flickered erratically around them. He did not judge her species or station, instead focusing solely on ensuring that each bandage was secure enough against potential movement while allowing healing processes to occur naturally beneath. Once he deemed most critical wounds stabilized temporarily with available resources, Marcus straightened and wiped his hands clean as best possible under conditions before turning back towards Zy'lethara, who watched him carefully still. "I have some rations," he said quietly, after a moment's pause, looking around at supplies again thoughtfully, pulling out small packets of dried meat and water bottles from pouches. She hesitated only briefly before accepting the offerings, with gratitude obvious in her posture, head slightly lowered, but not submissive by any means. He poured some water into his canteen cup for ease, then handed both over directly without hesitation, knowing such simple acts could mean worlds in these times of conflict. She drank slowly and gratefully, eyes occasionally darting towards Marcus, as if seeking reassurance or understanding beyond what words alone can convey. Satisfied she had enough sustenance to maintain strength through nightfall until next aid became available, Marcus moved back into the cave's interior, briefly collecting more supplies before returning once more alongside Zy'lethara, ensuring everything was ready should either need it unexpectedly. As he did so, silence settled between them, again comforting yet not entirely comfortable given their circumstances. He finally sat down near enough to guard her from potential threats, but far enough away to give respect for personal space she deserved in such fragile state, regardless of who they were, supposed enemies or allies formally declared otherwise. Marcus leaned against cavern wall himself now, watching shadows play across Zy'lethara's features softly, illuminated by faint flashlight beam nearby. Try and rest, he advised gently when done making last preparations, seeing signs that fatigue was finally catching up even more intensely than previously anticipated, especially for someone already weakened significantly from injuries sustained earlier today. "I'll keep watch." She nodded gratefully, but didn't protest further, instead letting herself ease slightly against cave wall, finding fleeting respite in unexpected peace provided amidst turmoil surrounding them both externally. Marcus kept vigil throughout the night, his eyes never fully closing as he monitored their surroundings intently for any sign of danger approaching from outside. Despite conditions being relatively secure here within Ravine's narrow confines, far enough away from immediate conflict zone proper, there was always potential threat lurking around, unseen corners or hidden dangers inherent simply because war left no room for complacency, even amongst allies. Hours passed by slowly under watchful gaze, each moment marked only subtly through changing positions of stars visible beyond cave entrance during intermittent breaks when light allowed sufficient visibility. Zy'lethara's condition remained stable thanks to Marcus's attentive care. Her breathing deepened gradually, indicating progress towards healing despite current limitations imposed by environment and available medical resources. As dawn began breaking over horizon outside, painting first rays of sunlight creeping slowly through narrow crevice entrance into cavernous shelter, a new day promised, but also brought fresh uncertainties along with it regarding ongoing conflict raging beyond their hiding place. Marcus stood up carefully, stretching muscles tight from prolonged sitting, yet still keeping wary eye on surroundings should trouble arise suddenly, unannounced as often happened during wartime. Zy'lethara stirred slightly upon first light's arrival, blinking open swollen eyes slowly before turning towards source of warmth and comfort beside her silent sentinel who had guarded through long night. She met Marcus' gaze, then, with renewed clarity, gratitude evident, yet also something else underlying beneath surface, recognition perhaps, or maybe just sheer wonder at encountering such unexpected compassion amidst otherwise bitter conflict. "Thank you," she murmured finally, after several breaths spent collecting thoughts and gathering strength anew from shared resolve to persevere through adversity together despite all obstacles presented thus far. It was simple enough, but carried profound weight between them nonetheless as foundation upon which growing trust could build further, going forward into uncertain future ahead, unknown yet hopeful somehow. Marcus merely nodded in response, offering small smile that held promise of ongoing support and protection regardless whatever challenges lay waiting around next corner. Both, knowing deep down inside something significant had shifted subtly within each other's hearts, despite initial reservations or doubts ever present at outset regarding true nature of this unlikely partnership formed amidst war's harshest realities. The first hint of dawn seeped through a thin crack in the cave entrance, casting long shadows and soft hues over Marcus' makeshift shelter for Zy'lethara. As light filtered into their hideout, her eyes fluttered open again to meet his gaze with renewed clarity, gratitude burning brightly within them despite the bruises around one eye. "Thank you," she whispered after a moment of silent contemplation, her voice barely audible but clear in its sincerity and weighty implications beyond mere words. It was an acknowledgment not just of the physical care Marcus had provided through countless hours of vigilant watchfulness during their perilous night together, but also something deeper in understanding that amidst the chaos and hostility of war's grim realities, there existed pockets of unexpected kindness. Marcus offered her a small, genuine smile, his eyes reflecting the same gratitude he felt for her silent presence. "You're welcome," was all he said, though in those two words lay a promise beyond immediate circumstances. No matter what transpired next, they would navigate it together with mutual support and steadfastness. As if on cue to punctuate this unspoken yet firmly established bond between them, the sudden sound of distant shouts shattered their quiet sanctuary. The unmistakable echo of boots running down gravel paths signaled an urgent approach towards their location. Marcus' hand instinctively reached for his sidearm, even as he turned sharply towards Zy'lethara's figure huddled closer to the cave wall behind him. "We need to move," he murmured urgently, though his tone held calm reassurance rather than panic or fear. She nodded wordlessly, but with swift resolve in her movements. As Marcus helped her rise slowly from where she had rested against the stone surface, pain flared briefly across her features before quickly fading back into grim determination. Together, they began to navigate their escape route out of this shelter through twisting passages and narrow crevices that promised safer hideouts further away. But luck was not on their side today. Just as Marcus thought he'd lost them in the labyrinthine network above ground, a sharp command rang out from behind trees and rocks nearby. "Halt! Don't move another inch!" Marcus froze immediately, glancing back at Zy'lethara to ensure she did too under his protective stance. They were surrounded now by soldiers clad entirely in tactical gear, with their leader approaching menacingly close, General HFY himself. "Sergeant Webb," the general snarled upon recognition of Marcus' face and posture. "What do you think you're doing?" Marcus didn't hesitate, meeting the older man's gaze squarely despite knowing full well what awaited him. "Saving a life," he replied firmly, voice steady but carrying an edge of defiance. General HFY sneered at this answer, clearly unsatisfied with such insubordination, even in war's direst moments. "A Kethvari princess is nothing to us. Our orders were clear: no mercy for the enemy." Zy'lethara stepped closer tentatively towards Marcus, though still behind his protective form, eyes wide and scared, but showing resilience nonetheless as she sought understanding amidst confusion. "Please," she started softly in human tongue learned during brief diplomatic exchanges before her fall. I am not your enemy here." Marcus glanced back at Zy'lethara, then turned to General HFY with steely resolve shining through tired, blue eyes now lit afire by conviction rather than weariness alone. "She needs medical care," Marcus insisted adamantly, gesturing towards Zy'lethara's visibly wounded state. "An imimetic." The general rolled his eyes dismissively, but didn't argue further against such flimsy reasoning. Instead, he barked commands efficiently to secure both of them in shackles, and led them away under heavy guard toward base camp proper. Back at headquarters, Marcus found himself facing far graver consequences than merely detention for disobeying orders. A full court martial had been convened mere hours after their capture. Guards flanked him silently as he walked into the dimly lit courtroom filled with stern-faced officers whose gazes bore heavily down upon his every movement and word. The prosecutor, Major Voss, wasted little time launching into accusations against Marcus's actions that night. "Sergeant Webb," she began coldly, without preamble, once seated beside General HFY at council table opposite him, "you have violated military protocol by aiding an enemy combatant." He stood tall under her scrutiny, nonetheless maintaining defiant calm as he prepared his defense, one rooted not in self-justification or prideful excuses, but simple truth regarding his oath and duty above all else. His only response when called to speak was steady declaration. "I am a medic," Marcus restated firmly, eyes meeting each judge's gaze unflinchingly throughout proceedings. "My orders are clear: to save lives." Major Voss frowned, deeply displeased by this defense, lacking contrition or even basic understanding of military priorities amidst battlefield logistics and strategic necessities over individual moral codes. "The HFY shot down your ship," she pointed out sharply, aiming for emotional leverage against Marcus' sense of loyalty towards comrades lost. "They are our enemy." Marcus remained resolute despite such attempted manipulation. "My duty is not to choose sides based on species or allegiance. It's about helping those in need." General HFY interjected forcefully into proceedings then, slamming fist onto wooden desk between them, with authority and anger alike fueling his tirade against Marcus' perceived insubordination. "Disobeying orders leaves us vulnerable," he thundered, "and now we face potential retaliation from HFY forces for harboring their princess, a clear breach of protocols." The courtroom buzzed with murmured agreement among assembled officers, but Marcus held fast to his stance, refusing to back down under pressure or threat. "Without knowing who she was," he countered calmly yet firmly, "I followed my conscience and did what any medic would do regardless." Major Voss leaned forward slightly toward him, then, as if gauging response for some unseen purpose beyond mere accusation, "Your actions endanger our mission," she pressed on, relentlessly seeking chink in his defenses. Marcus stood firm, meeting her gaze squarely once more before responding quietly, but with unwavering conviction. "My conscience doesn't check ID tags." Silence filled room, momentarily heavy and charged with tension between Marcus' defiance versus authority figure's determination to maintain order amidst chaos of war. Outside courtroom, Zy'lethara was held separately, under strict surveillance, unable even then to offer testimony or defense for herself, lacking proper identification documents within human bureaucracy's rigid structures. Her fate thus tied directly to outcome determined here, without her voice heard aloud, despite being central figure at heart of entire situation's crux. As trial continued, moving towards its inevitable conclusion, with grim certainty shadowing proceedings, Marcus faced potential death sentence hanging heavily over his head, a stark reminder that sometimes doing right meant sacrificing everything, even if it didn't conform neatly within lines drawn by conflict's harsh realities. Yet amidst such dark possibilities, there remained light trust built between unlikely allies across species barrier and hope found unexpectedly, amidst most harrowing circumstances imaginable. But this chapter ended not on high notes of resolution or triumph, but rather sharp cliffhanger poised between Marcus' fate, hanging precariously balanced against greater war's unyielding machinery. As proceedings neared final verdict, all eyes remained fixed upon outcome, uncertain yet inevitable, awaiting delivery, with hearts heavy and spirits tense alike within confines of military courtroom, where life hung delicately suspended above sword edge, separating justice from judgment. The grim prison cell was dimly lit, its walls a dull gray that seemed to suck in all light and color, leaving only shadows dancing along the cold metal bars of the windowless room's entry. Zy'lethara lay on a makeshift cot, her body twisted and scarred from injuries sustained during the crash landing. Her breath came out as shallow gasps, each one a testament to the pain she endured. Marcus Webb had been allowed limited access to Zy'lethara under strict supervision by General Haraway's orders. The general did not trust Marcus' motives, but could not ignore his defiance in saving her life. As he entered the cell with 2 guards flanking him, Marcus kept a wary eye on them while focusing intently on Zy'lethara. I mean princess, Marcus began awkwardly, unsure how to address someone of such high standing from another world when she appeared so vulnerable and helpless. How are you feeling? Her eyes fluttered open weakly, as if the mere act required immense effort. One eye was swollen shut, while her other gaze met his with a mix of fear and gratitude that made Marcus's heart clench. I am healing, she whispered, voice barely above a raspy whisper. It hurt to speak even more than it did to breathe. Slowly, Marcus moved closer, sitting beside the cot on an upturned crate. The guards remained vigilant, but stepped back slightly out of respect for their prisoner's condition and the soldier's authority. Does it hurt? Marcus asked gently, already knowing the answer, but needing verbal confirmation to understand her pain fully. She nodded minutely. Yes, much. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort without further words needed between them. The bond they had forged transcended language barriers and cultural divides, a rare connection born from shared suffering rather than mutual understanding of identity or purpose. As Marcus sat there holding vigil over Zy'lethara's twisted form, the guards noticed something peculiar about their charge. Small, almost imperceptible shifts in her appearance began to occur. One side of her face started to smooth out slightly, while patches of what appeared to be fresh skin materialized near wounds that had looked like they would never close. We should report this, one guard muttered under his breath to the other, glancing nervously at Marcus as if unsure whether to mention such an anomaly in front of him. Her injuries are changing. Marcus heard them, but kept silent and still, watching closely while maintaining physical contact with Zy'lethara through gentle pressure on her shoulder. It's happening, she murmured softly, after a moment, seemingly aware that the guards had noted her transformation too. A faint hint of pride flickered in those golden eyes, despite the pain etched into every line of her face and body. What's happening? Marcus asked quietly, pressing closer to hear better without alarming his captors further by drawing attention away from them toward himself alone. When I am healed, she whispered almost silently so only he could catch it, I will not look like this. Marcus squeezed her hand firmly in response, the gesture conveying more than any spoken words ever could. You do not have to explain anything. Just get better. Zy'lethara's gaze softened at that reassurance, a rare trace of warmth blooming beneath the surface despite her obvious agony and fear over what she looked like now. She had expected nothing but hostility or indifference from others who saw this form. Marcus's kindness came as a shock and comfort in equal measure. The guards exchanged wary glances behind them again, wondering if there was some kind of spell at play here given how rapidly the princess appeared to be recovering before their eyes under conditions that should have her barely surviving. One even took out his calm device briefly, but hesitated from actually sending an alert-up chain of command when he saw Marcus watching him closely. Meanwhile, as Zy'lethara's body continued its slow transformation back towards something resembling health rather than a grotesque mockery of it, she seemed almost happy. It was hard to reconcile that feeling with her current state, but the glint in her eye suggested otherwise. Marcus himself found himself increasingly baffled by what he saw playing out before him, and yet strangely reassured too. This strange alien woman, princess or not, had touched his life profoundly already, despite everything pitted against them both. He couldn't help but hope for a resolution that would allow her to find peace again in whatever form she took. The hours passed with Marcus remaining by Zy'lethara's side, speaking only when necessary and offering silent support whenever possible. Her physical condition improved gradually yet steadily while he watched over her like a guardian angel from another world, a soldier who had ignored orders for reasons beyond simple duty or loyalty, but because of something deeper within himself. By the time night fell outside and the prison cell remained shrouded in darkness, Zy'lethara's true healing began to become more apparent, even through limited illumination. The guards whispered anxiously amongst themselves again, but dared not intervene further once they saw Marcus looking at them expectantly, as if daring anyone to make another move against his charge. Eventually she slept deeply, the effects of her injuries finally allowing some rest after days of pain and fear. As Marcus watched over her peaceful slumber, he felt a mixture of relief and dread weighing heavily on him, fate hanging precariously above their heads in this war-torn world where such bonds seemed like fairy tales woven afar. Impossibilities. And so the chapter ended with Zy'lethara beginning to heal under circumstances that puzzled even those tasked with keeping her contained, and Marcus's steadfast presence standing guard over both of them as night fell heavy and foreboding, ready for whatever dawn might bring, but hoping against hope it would not come at too high a cost after all they had endured together already. Indeed, the night had stretched on endlessly, a relentless march of darkness that seemed to mock the fragile bond forming between Sergeant Marcus Webb and Zy'lethara. As dawn approached, Marcus found himself watching over her in near silence, his heart pounding with each breath she took. He knew what was coming, he could feel it deep down in his gut, a momentous shift that would change everything. Zy'lethara stirred first, her eyes fluttering open cautiously as the sun began to rise outside their small cell window. She looked at Marcus, a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty etched into her features. "You're still here," she whispered, her voice barely more than a hoarse rasp but carrying all the weight of unspoken words. Marcus nodded solemnly, his hand reaching out to squeeze hers gently once again. "Of course," he replied softly, trying to convey through touch what mere speech could not capture. He watched as Zy'lethara's expression softened further. She seemed to find comfort in this silent assurance that despite everything happening around them, there was still someone who cared. As the hours passed and light filtered into their small space, something miraculous began to happen before Marcus's eyes. Zy'lethara started transforming once more. But it wasn't just her physical wounds healing, it felt like a rebirth of sorts unfolding right in front of him. Her mottled skin regained its natural luster, the twisted asymmetry giving way slowly but surely until only hints remained beneath an ethereal glow. Each breath she took seemed to draw out more vitality and grace, as if stripping away layers upon layers of pain. The guards outside exchanged nervous glances, their voices low but tinged with disbelief. They had been briefed on what the crown princess should look like, radiant beauty beyond mortal comprehension, and yet here was an alien woman whose visage would make even hardened soldiers wince in discomfort just moments ago, now transforming into something almost otherworldly. One of them turned to his communication device, fingers poised hesitantly over buttons before glancing back at Marcus, who stood vigilant beside Zy'lethara. "Don't," he said quietly yet firmly. "Enough for the guard's ears alone." The soldier flinched but nodded slightly in acknowledgement, lowering the comm unit without pressing send. He wasn't ready to report on this. It felt too surreal still, a phenomenon that defied explanation and logic alike. Finally, Zy'lethara's transformation completed itself with an almost audible click, a sudden shift from wounded horror back into her true form, luminous golden eyes now fully visible under symmetrical features of flowing silver skin. She was beautiful beyond compare again, exuding such poise and elegance that even Marcus felt a pang in his chest, marveling at what he had witnessed. In awe yet still guarded, she looked around their makeshift quarters before turning her gaze back to Marcus with an intensity that spoke volumes about the trust built between them despite everything. "This is who I am," she stated plainly, but also as if explaining herself for others' benefit more than just stating a fact. There was pride there mixed in with some measure of vulnerability. The cell door creaked open then, and Marcus stood protectively before Zy'lethara, even though he knew they were outnumbered. 12 guards flanking him now on either side, while another led the way towards what seemed like an interrogation room or command center. As they moved through corridors bathed in dim light filtering from above, ground areas beyond walls thick with dirt and debris, Marcus felt a growing tension building up around them. They arrived at their destination, where General HFY awaited impatiently behind his desk strewn with maps and communication devices flickering with activity. His eyes locked onto Zy'lethara immediately upon entry, a mix of shock and recognition crossing over into suspicion almost instantly. "You," he snarled, voice dripping venomously towards the princess. Zy'lethara didn't flinch under his scrutiny, but held her ground steadily, instead turning slightly to face Marcus one more time before addressing General HFY directly, with a regal air despite circumstances far from formal protocol. "Yes," she answered simply yet confidently, enough that it commanded respect, even if only grudgingly given initially. General HFY's eyes narrowed further as he took in the scene fully laid out before him. "The crown princess of Kethvari," he spat contemptuously, turning sharply towards Marcus, who stepped forward resolutely despite any potential consequence. Now looming large and unavoidable. "This man saved my life when I was at my lowest," Zy'lethara stated firmly without looking away from HFY's steely glare, even as she pointed directly at Sergeant Webb standing by her side. "What does your humanity say about those who wanted to execute him for it?" The room fell silent instantly. Everyone present held their breath, waiting anxiously for General HFY's reaction, especially the guards, whose faces showed clear apprehension of retribution coming from higher command should they have failed to carry out orders correctly. General HFY stared at Marcus, a moment longer before his expression softened minutely, almost imperceptibly, if one didn't know him well. It was gone just as fast, though, when he turned back fully towards Zy'lethara again. "Princess," he acknowledged formally, yet still with no warmth present in tone or gesture. "Is there justice here?" Zy'lethara pressed further boldly now that she had the floor, given her unorthodox position and newfound power over proceedings. She glanced between HFY and Marcus once more before continuing resolutely, "or only fear driving decisions?" HFY hesitated briefly under such direct challenge, but regained composure swiftly enough to respond coldly still. "Justice is a luxury we cannot afford in war." "Then perhaps your definition of humanity needs rethinking," Zy'lethara shot back, just as icily, though there was also an underlying plea hidden beneath sharp wordchoke, that maybe, even amidst this conflict, they could find common ground worth fighting for. Marcus watched the exchange with increasing tension gnawing at his insides, knowing full well how dangerous it had become standing up to such authority over someone who technically belonged among their enemies. Yet seeing Zy'lethara's strength and conviction before them gave him courage to stand firm too, despite any personal risk involved now that he had crossed lines himself long ago. General HFY sighed deeply then, shoulders slumping momentarily, as if under great burden, even though outward appearance suggested otherwise, still largely intact, physically speaking at least. "Very well," he conceded finally, after a tense silence, filled only by unspoken thoughts exchanged between everyone present, including Zy'lethara and Marcus, who shared a brief but meaningful glance, now solidifying their bond further despite everything hanging in balance once more. The rest of the chapter ended there as planned, with General HFY's decision yet uncertainly poised like an impending storm ready to break at any moment, a critical juncture where fate hung precariously between war and hope through actions taken by unlikely allies under extraordinary circumstances. Night had fallen heavy again outside their guarded quarters, but inside Marcus felt a glimmer of dawn breaking within Zy'lethara's eyes, now matching his own determination, even if the path ahead remained shrouded in shadows still heavily cast from unresolved conflicts, both personal and planetary, wide-scale alike. And so the chapter closed on this note, precarious yet promising, as night fell heavy, but forebodingly so, for whatever dawn might bring after all they had endured together already. The room was silent, filled only by the soft hum of distant machinery and the sound of breaths held in anticipation. Marcus stood beside Zy'lethara, his presence a steady rock against the storm that raged around them. General HFY's expression had softened briefly when he addressed Marcus, but quickly reverted to its rigid formality. "Princess," General HFY began, his voice low and controlled, "your people are not enemies any longer. They are guests under our protection until their safety can be assured." Zy'lethara shifted slightly on her feet, the movement almost imperceptible, but clear enough to Marcus, who watched closely. She was testing the waters, gauging how far she could push and whether there were cracks in this new alliance that might serve as a foundation for something greater. "Is there justice here?" Zy'lethara asked boldly, her voice unwavering despite the tension that hung heavy between them like the weight of impending war. "Or only fear driving decisions?" General HFY's eyes narrowed slightly before he responded, his tone cold and calculating. "Justice is a luxury we cannot afford in war." Zy'lethara met his gaze head on, her golden eyes blazing with an intensity that Marcus had never seen before. There was defiance there, but also something else, a deep-seated hope that echoed through the chamber. "Then perhaps your definition of humanity needs rethinking," she shot back just as icily, though beneath the sharp words lay a plea. "Maybe even amidst this conflict, we can find common ground worth fighting for." Marcus felt his heart constrict with each word Zy'lethara spoke. The weight of what was at stake hung heavy on him, lives that could be saved or lost based on decisions made right here, now. General Haraway sighed deeply, then, shoulders slumping momentarily, as if under a great burden, even though outward appearance suggested otherwise, physically intact, still largely so despite the tension. "Very well," he conceded finally, after another tense silence, filled only by unspoken thoughts exchanged between everyone present, including Zy'lethara and Marcus, who shared a brief but meaningful glance, solidifying their bond further amidst whatever personal risk involved now that they had crossed lines themselves long ago. "Under your royal orders, we shall treat our guest accordingly," General Haraway continued carefully, his gaze sliding to the other military officials in the room. "But know this, should any of you fail to uphold these new conditions without question, the consequences will be severe." The guards shifted uncomfortably under the weight of their commander's words and glances that bore down on them with unspoken threats. "Understood?" General Haraway demanded sharply. A series of curt nods greeted him from those present. No one wanted to provoke further conflict by challenging his authority, not when it could mean the difference between life or death for Zy'lethara, and potentially a broader cessation of hostilities that would benefit everyone if negotiations proceeded smoothly enough without incident. General Haraway's expression eased slightly as he nodded once more towards Marcus. "Sergeant Webb," he addressed him directly now, with a new measure of respect evident in his voice despite how reserved it remained overall given the circumstances, still volatile and fragile at best currently. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied quietly yet firmly, keeping his eyes focused on Zy'lethara, who watched him closely from where she stood just beside him within this guarded chamber of tense negotiations. "Ensure that Princess Zy'lethara receives all necessary medical care as soon as possible. Your expertise is invaluable to our continued cooperation," General Haraway instructed, with a nod towards her now, indicating clearly enough his understanding and appreciation of the risks Marcus had taken earlier back at their makeshift camps hidden deep within enemy territory. "Of course, sir." Marcus nodded respectfully in return before turning fully towards Zy'lethara herself. "Are you ready to go?" he asked softly, concern evident on his face, despite her current state looking much improved since they'd first brought her here from the battlefield several days ago. Now, given time and medical attention, Zy'lethara met Marcus's gaze with a mixture of gratitude and determination etched deeply within those golden eyes. "More than ready," she replied quietly but firmly, reaching out to grasp his hand briefly in an unspoken show of support and solidarity between them, despite everything around them still very much unsure yet fragile. The medical wing was quiet as they made their way there, with minimal security presence now that initial shock over her survival had faded enough among other forces present here. Marcus led the way down dimly lit corridors, his pace steady but brisk, wanting to ensure she received proper care before anything else could be considered fully settled between them all just yet. Once inside the sterile room allocated for such high-priority cases as hers now required under new orders from higher command, given recent developments, indeed significant enough already to warrant unprecedented measures being taken towards ensuring her survival and recovery above most others typically prioritized normally. Marcus moved quickly, checking equipment readouts, and making sure everything was in order before turning back towards Zy'lethara, who stood by a nearby window staring out at the night sky outside, still lit ominously with artificial lights marking strategic points throughout city defenses surrounding this facility. "Are you feeling better?" he asked gently, as she turned to face him again, noting how her features were already smoothing slightly under skilled medical care administered over past days, now that initial injuries sustained had begun healing adequately enough despite continued pain evident from lingering effects still present visibly clear on her skin, and movement overall remaining restricted somewhat due such trauma initially inflicted. Zy'lethara nodded slowly, but managed to smile softly nonetheless at Marcus, an expression rare yet genuine in its warmth, even more so considering current situation, entirely new territory for both their worlds indeed. "Much better," she replied quietly with sincerity evident in her tone and eyes, now reflecting back him directly, again once more fully focused solely on present moment before them together. Over the next few hours, Marcus worked tirelessly alongside medical staff to oversee Zy'lethara's continued recovery efforts, administering pain medications carefully while monitoring for any complications that might arise as healing progressed steadily, indeed albeit slowly, considering extent of injuries sustained previously during crash landing event itself. Above all else, now critical aspects ensuring ongoing stability maintained despite initial setback, already overcome significantly thanks largely due to his own timely intervention back on battlefield plus subsequent care provided here within secure facility thereafter. As night fell heavily again outside their guarded quarters, Marcus finally stepped away from Zy'lethara's bedside, feeling both exhausted yet oddly relieved as well, given progress made thus far indeed promising enough, so far at least relative safety maintained overall despite ongoing tensions still simmering just beneath surface elsewhere throughout this larger conflict raging between worlds. Beyond merely here, he found himself drawn back towards her once more, though unable to stay away completely, knowing full well how much she needed not only physical healing but also emotional support during such tumultuous times, indeed fraught with uncertainty ahead, yet hope burgeoning steadily now amidst unlikely alliance forged through shared compassion and understanding rather than mere enmity or fear alone any longer. "Thank you," Zy'lethara murmured softly as Marcus approached her again, reaching out to gently take his hand in hers, though he hadn't been expecting such a gesture given circumstances, still highly sensitive overall, nonetheless genuine appreciation evident, indeed heartfelt expression of gratitude conveyed directly now through simple yet meaningful touch shared between them despite all else currently surrounding their immediate situation. Marcus squeezed Zy'lethara's hand briefly in return, finding himself at a loss for words that could fully convey what he felt towards her beyond silent support and unwavering commitment already proven repeatedly, indeed no matter costs involved personally or otherwise. "You're welcome," was all he managed to say quietly yet firmly, nonetheless conveying strength amidst vulnerability so evident present within those golden eyes now looking up at him with renewed hope shining clearly through despite lingering pain, still visible marks of healing process ongoing overall. "Then stay with me," Zy'lethara continued softly but resolutely, her grip tightening slightly around his hand as she looked deeply into Marcus's tired blue eyes, searching for assurance that echoed back to moments shared before amidst darkness and uncertainty. Help me build a world where no one is left to die for being different. Marcus blinked in surprise at the heartfelt request, feeling a warmth spread through him despite the fatigue that weighed on his shoulders like lead. He glanced away briefly towards Zy'lethara. Marcus, Zy'lethara, Zy'lethara, Marcus, Marcus.